Welcome. My name is Chris Ajemian. I'm the CEO and founder of Kate's Tutoring and Educational Services based in New York and in London. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar, When Your Kitchen is Your Classroom. Just a few housekeeping things to start. I have a number of slides. I'll walk through the slides. And if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat thread, and I'll attend to them afterwards because we're gonna have a Q&A. Okay. And if at any time you can't hear me, or if the internet goes out, just again put it in the chat thread, and I'll do my best to kind of manage this session. So Kate's stands for Chris Ajemian. Again, that's me, Tutoring Educational Services. And we started working with students using learning technologies really back in 2010. And in 2010, a very important thing happened, which is that Skype became an acceptable form of communication for parents. That's actually when our overseas business started to really get going. And then we've been doing a lot of work with learning technologies ever since then. So other than just working with, say, students one-on-one or running online classes, we've also designed really large-scale programs for students in the United Kingdom, 200 students at a time. That's using blended learning strategies where it's partly in person, partly online. We've also done completely online programs, and we've also done programs with places like Yale University in Africa, where we designed their Yale Young African Scholars SAT/ACT program a couple years back. However, that Yale program was sort of like a seminal moment in the company's sort of history. It's probably our biggest failure. And the reason being is because we ran into some problems using different technologies that we hadn't quite seen before, right? So specifically things like access to electricity, broadband, and even people who didn't quite have any devices. So, that's what compelled me to go back to graduate school. I got my degree in technology, innovation, education from the education school at Harvard University. And now, at this point, we've seen our fair share in the learning technology space. And we've put together some information for you today and hope you find it helpful. So, all right, so here we go. So our agenda for today is as follows. We're going to talk about realities of education technologies. We'll do an overview quickly of tools and resources. Then we'll get into strategies for successful remote learning, as well as advice for parents, and then using your time constructively. And then we'll do a Q&A. All right, so realities of educational technologies. So if there's one thing that I have learned about ed tech, in my career, is that strangely enough, it actually doesn't work. Now that's with a caveat, because if you look at educational technologies as the be all end all, as a learning strategy, it's not going to happen. If you're waiting for a silver bullet to come around, so that's not the be all end all solution, you'll be waiting for a while. The field is just not there yet. However, if you look at learning technologies really as a means of collaboration, and ultimately as a solution that's more about delivering more personalized instruction, then you can make the most of them, all right? Or at least of what's available to us, at this point. So strengths of educational technologies, a couple. So number one, they're able to organize a lot of content, okay? I mean, literally unlimited amounts of content. Also, it can organize different types of content, multimodal content, like text, audio, video, interactive, modules, even like, social and also website links. Also, educational technologies are adaptable for different learners or for people with who succeed using different learning strategies. Readers versus auditory learners versus visually based people versus people who like to learn more experientially, people who might work better in a social context or interpersonal, or even independent learners. And actually, this might be perhaps the most underappreciated feature of digital technology over traditional textbook learning, because digital allows formats to be fluid, right? They're really, really dynamic. And so it opens up worlds for people who may not be able to access traditional non-text-based learning solutions like textbooks or whatnot, because maybe they're blind or have low vision factors. Another thing too about ed tech as far as strengths go, obviously it's able to store, analyze, and report out data to teachers. It can, it's also easily scalable, whether you're working with one student or you're working with hundreds of students at a time. Obviously the technology is really useful in that respect. And also for, automation, right? Tracking, follow-ups, bumps and notifications to kind of help you stay accountable and consistent and on target in your work. These are some of the best parts of educational technologies. Now, as far as some of the weaknesses goes, there is obviously trade-offs of privacy, data sharing, giving your data to somebody who you don't know what they're going to be doing with the data. That's obviously very sensitive. Also, just lack of access to the technology, whether because there's no electricity, no internet, there isn't access to devices. And you'd be surprised. Some of the things that are staple resources are just not, in America or even like where we all live, they're just not in other places of the world. And in fact, funny enough, I'm currently right now in Portland, Maine. And, yesterday we had a virtual snow day. I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? We moved to all these remote learning strategies and we had a virtual snow day because of a snowstorm came and knocked out electricity in a third of our town, right? So that's obviously another shortcoming of the technologies. Additionally, there's also maybe an issue with prioritization or assimilation, where people who aren't just content to sit there and receive information, kind of like how this webinar is designed right now, that may not be the best way to actually engage them in the learning process. So people who may not be autodidacts or who really kind of thrive in interactivity, that can also be a shortcoming or weakness for them with the technologies. Also, technology is technology. It's not a person. It can feel impersonal. Even when you're being sent messages from, a learning management system, and you're getting bumps and notifications and saying, hey, Chris, hey, Jane, hey, Judy, it still feels actually quite impersonal, right? So, that's also a factor. And then also sort of lastly, this idea of a fragmented ed tech landscape. A lot of these products are siloed, right? And can't talk to one another. And, there's a lack of integration, a lack of unification amongst different learning strategies. And, it can be a real problem. But there are some best practices. Now, there's no perfect solution, but if you're looking at learning technologies as a way to design a strategy that helps you stay accountable, helps you stay on track, and puts the data in the hands of your teachers, then you're on the right track, okay? You want to devise your own plan, you want to stick to that plan, and you want to allow that data to reach your teacher, to reach your, whoever your guide is in your process, so they can actually adapt it for your learning journey, okay? With really good data going into the system, teachers are able to analyze it and use it to be more accurate in their support of you, as well as more personalized in their instruction. And the truth of the matter is that technology cannot, replace the teacher. So let's use it then to help the teacher do their job or do their practice that much better. So we'll talk about now just a quick overview of some tools and resources. There's a number of popular tools and resources out there. Some of you may know, some you may not know about. I want to quickly touch upon them. So you had some context as to what they are, what they're designed to do, and how you can make the most of them. So we'll talk about, hardware, software, and virtual classrooms. So we talk about tools. We're talking either about, a hardware or software product that helps you perform a specific action more efficiently. So in talking about hardware, we have things like smartphones, tablets, computers, pencils, notebooks, even the traditional stuff. These are all tools. There's also software tools though, video conferencing platforms like, FaceTime or Skype or even Zoom or WhatsApp or WeChat or Google Hangout. Productivity tools, things like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, G Suite with docs, sheets, slides, or even, some of the Apple products, right, that you have in the iCloud, Pages, Numbers, and in Keynote. or simply just email. These are all examples of software tools that can also be used as educational technologies. There's also teacher communication apps. Maybe your school is using something like Class Dojo. I know for my daughter who's in 5th grade right now, her teacher posts everything through Class Dojo. And that's really her way of communicating with us and helping us kind of stay informed in with what's going on in the classroom. And also there's other product out there, like Canebo, if you're working in the early childhood education space and you have to track learning standards in progress through benchmarks, you might be using a product like Canebo. And then also information management systems. These are places that basically just kind of store and manage data. Some of the more popular ones are things like Google Drive, right? Dropbox or iCloud. And then you have some virtual classrooms, including Zoom. So Zoom can be used as a virtual classroom. Skype can be used as a virtual classroom. They're not developed for that, but they can be used that way. Same thing with Google Hangouts, as well as Adobe Connect, which is what we tend to use for our large scale programs. And then, as far as resources go, some of the popular resources to go to for information. So if we talk about how a tool helps you perform an action more efficiently, a resource really provides you with content with which to perform that action with. So resources are super critical right now because every student, whether it's a 4th grader or 11th grader, seems to be finishing their homework or their assigned work from their teacher by like 10:30 a.m. and have the rest of the day free. So where are people going for content? Where are they going for resources? So Google search, right? Pretty basic. Google's a great source for that. Also, I find that Google Images is terrific. If I go into Google Images and I Google what I'm looking for and say like worksheet, right, or like practice, a whole slew of options are going to come up and be helpful. Also, YouTube is now like one of the most popular learning platforms, as well as Vimeo. And also, you can go to Facebook and do, Facebook Live, or, go to Facebook for recommendations on what to be using, whether it's through friends or through online groups or what have you. Some of the things that I recommend as being probably like rigorous and also adaptable for learners are the following. So number one, I think state education websites, sort of like, like the NJSLA, for math, ELA, and science, obviously particularly for public school students, those are phenomenal resources for more content. So we're running right now, we were running, it's currently on pause, an NJSLA prep program at a New Jersey charter school for grades 3 through 8. And so we've been pretty deep into the Pearson platform that's open source, and it's kind of phenomenal. I mean, they have tons and tons of material on it. And, not just say practice tests, but also other modules and other resources for practice. Additionally, one of my absolute favorite websites is mathdrills.com. So math/drills.com. In fact, I can, send a link later on to show you what it looks like. It's phenomenal. They have virtually every math topic that's important to anyone in a traditional sort of math curriculum. And they not only have, sort of multiple sort of variations on like the theme within a math competency, there's also like multiple resources for it. So math-drills.com, if you're looking for more math work for your, for your son or your daughter or your students, that's really great. So additionally, so CK12, CK12.org is a company out of San Francisco, really Silicon Valley. So Karen, if you have a question, wouldn't mind just putting it in the chat thread. I'll come back to it during the Q&A. So CK12 is it's an open free resource, and they have fantastic resources for math, for science, as well as for reading and writing. And the thing that I love about CK12 is that it's like Khan Academy insofar that you're able to kind of like create your own classroom, right? Use resources, but it does two things really, really well. Number one, they have these things called flex books, right? So these are like already organized, sort of packaged digital textbooks that you can download. And what's more, you can actually manipulate them for your own purposes, for your own local context. And then you're also able to upload it back to the site if you want, which is like terrific. And then secondly, of all the different platforms out there that I have seen, at least, They are one of the leaders in multimodal learning strategies. So like, for example, if you want a text-based description of, say like, I don't know, macromolecules or proteins, they will have that, right? However, they'll also have animations, okay? And those animations are also interactive. So you can actually make it more of an experiential and kind of like project-based, get your hands dirty learning task. And so it's great. So there's also some video on there. There's also some audio on there, I believe. But, it's a great way for learners of all kinds to kind of go and find not just the content that they're looking for, but also the way in which they may want to learn the content. So that's a really great, that's a great solution. Now, so then here, Karen, thank you for your question. What about IXL and Minecraft? Those are great too. We don't tend to use those as much. IXL tends to advertise a lot on mathdrills.com, and we've used that for some of our students, but we're not using that as regularly in our practice, but it's a phenomenal resource. So I certainly support it. Also, there's another website called Creative Commons. Creative Commons is a mostly open source material where people are putting up different textbooks, they're putting different learning modules, and they also have like they have a much more diverse array of resources for almost anybody who wants to learn anything. And that's another one that we really kind of like. Now, as far as some novel or offline strategies, obviously your peers and your friends are great resources for information. Also sort of online communities, whether you're a part of a mom's group or a dad's group or an educators group or a counselors group, those are great places for resources. Obviously service providers in your local area or globally, and then really finally your teacher. Whenever my kids ask me for recommendations as to what they should be using to kind of augment their learning, it's not happening as much as I may as I may want, but I always say, go back to Mrs. Barrett, right? Go back to your teacher. She's the one who really understands your learning journey best and understands what resources may be most applicable and aligned with what she's trying to do in class. And so she's really, a phenomenal resource. And also teachers always love suggestions as well. So if you do have, certain platforms that you'd like to use and your teacher may not be using it, at this point especially, I think people are very excited to hear about any and all resources that are available to help. So a little more quickly through this. So learning management systems and LMS. So what is this? These are usually big platforms that manage all aspects of a student's sort of learning journey. So, we'll see things like, platforms that help us kind of communicate with teachers. We'll see, different ways of delivering online classes through LMSs. We're also going to see, ways of submitting assignments through LMSs, as well as tracking grades and performance. And so, the differences in these products really come down to what degree the system automates communication amongst learner-teacher functionalities, as well as other features like broadcast communication. Some LMS platforms that you might be familiar with are like Google Classroom or, Edline and Canvas to an extent, even Khan Academy or online learning platforms like Udemy and Udacity can be described as LMSs. But, at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is right now, your teachers in school have already kind of made these decisions for you, what tools they're using, what resources they're using, what LMS or learning management system or strategy they're putting into place. But hopefully this kind of gives you some context, some sense of the landscape of what's out there, as well as a framework and a vocabulary to understand what you may encounter, in the weeks and months ahead. So strategies for remote learning. This is probably going to be the most applicable, this and the next topic to people on the call. But a successful transition to remote learning really involves a healthy balance of time, space, and technology, not to mention self-awareness and self-regulation. So time, first, we want to make sure that we design a daily schedule and incorporate what I call buckets of time for planned and essential activities, right? Now, this is a good practice in general, but it's especially important in times like these where we've lost structure, right? We don't have the structure of a school day. And really, and this is probably not news to you, but just the repetition of daily activity and kind of being in a rhythm that has like benefits that go beyond just cognition, right? There's also benefits for the affective domain. You know, it brings about an internal order that has benefits for our life in general. And also, you know, your timetable doesn't even need to be organized to the minute, but at the very least, it should be categorized as some, you know, within some buckets. So like, for example, what are those buckets? You know, number one, like, you know, personal time. Okay. You need time for yourself. For me, at least, I get up a little bit earlier than the people in my house. And so that's usually my personal time in the morning to kind of get myself internally ordered. Exercise, right? Especially now, if it's safe for you, try to get outside and get your body moving, right? That's really, really important to our overall health, you know, not just in terms of learning. Also, you know, what's your bucket for getting yourself ready? You know, by the way, you want to shower every day, get dressed every day as you normally would. Okay. I try to dress the way that I normally would dress if I was going to the office, even when I'm staying home. It just does something to you. You know, the clothes, even wearing the shoes you wear, that does something to your, you know, to your being, gets you kind of queued up and ready and on point to work and perform, right? Obviously, there's buckets for breakfast, lunch, there's dinner, and then academic time, whether it's in the morning, afternoon, the evening, you know, one of those three, or maybe a mix of them. But also time for personal enrichment, as well as entertainment and socializing and play, downtime and sleep. And so what I'm going to do right now is just to kind of help illustrate this, I'm going to share if I can find it, where is it? Yeah, right here. This timetable that I have created for one of my students. By the way, this is a CK12 website right here. You know how you fly your rocket. We press play. We get this little animation going, right? Let's watch the rocket launch. Then over here, you can see over here, you can kind of recalibrate rocket's mass, rocket thrust. I was playing with this earlier before. But towards the timetables go, so this is a timetable for a student who is in boarding school, which their time is heavily structured, okay? And just to kind of give you a glimpse of what, you know, how specific one can be, you know, this student, you know, we have his time sort of intervals, or if you want to say it, time buckets over here, sort of organized in the way that the school organizes their time. We got his Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you know, worked out. We obviously have all of his classes. He has an elective. He has his breaks, right, in the middle of the day. You know, I'm working with this student on ACT preparation, so we know when he's doing his time math. He has his lunch, you know, his other classes, and then his other sort of activities, right? So this is how granular it kind of can be. And then what we did, what's one of the things that's kind of interesting about, you know, having a timetable for school already in place, when we're dealing with things like coronavirus and doing remote learning, we're then able to take the structure and adapt it over to remote learning. And that's what this looks like right here. So you'll see how I broke out, I highlighted it in yellow for you so you could see it, but we've worked out when the student is waking up and when he's stretching, you know, when he's exercising. This guy likes to run, you know, when he's showering, eating, and breakfast, and then his break. And then the rest of it is pretty much the same. Although because he can't do sports, you know, we have put in green when he has to go outside and get some, you know, get some exercise, right? Every single day. We have him handing in his phone because he needs to do that, this one. And then obviously also when his lights need to go out. So again, having a sort of set timetable, you know, makes the sort of transition to remote learning and sort of managing your own day a lot easier. So hope that little peek there is helpful. All right, so back to this. Right, and then also in terms of having our buckets, we also want to prioritize within our buckets. I like to prioritize, you know, my buckets, really my day, into 3 categories. Number 1, core tasks. These are what I call like legacy building, or like the most important tasks that I have to get done. I want to do those first. I usually do those personally between 10 a.m. and 12. Okay. Then the second sort of bucket of priority is what we call FTA, feed the animals. Okay. These are things that we have to do. And if we don't do them, the animals may die. Okay. It may not necessarily be legacy building activities, but these are, things like whether it's, logging information or, doing some client work or doing who knows what. Okay. Oh, and by the way, the core and FTA are terms that I borrowed from a gentleman online who created some pretty interesting strategies for managing their time. And I can send that information to you also in a follow-up email. And so I have core FTA. And then after that, I have my own that I've added called all other tasks. So like, for example, in terms of managing an educational services company, I'll do my 10 a.m. to 12. That's about making sure that our staff is, aligned, focused, feeling supported. Then after that, I'll have my lunch, and then I'll go into working with clients, say 1 to 5, 1 to 6. I'll do my dinner, with my family. I have some, quiet time, with the kids, my wife, and then, around 8 o'clock, I'll do all the other stuff that, needs to get done, but isn't top priority. So prioritizing within those buckets is really important. Now, as far as balancing those buckets go, especially now with remote learning, if you're living in a household right now with more than one person in it, you need to coordinate. We don't want one person, sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast while the other person is trying to run a conference call with or a video call with the team at the firm, right? So there needs to be communication there. Additionally, if you're sharing devices, like two kids sharing an iPad who both need to access modules or assignments from their teacher, perhaps one student's playtime or reading time occurs and the other one is doing, her academic time, right? Also, I think you want to, pick an end for screen time. My wife, Sarah, has a really good rule that she instituted since we moved to remote learning here in Maine, which is, 3 o'clock, school day is over, screen time's over, right? And then we're doing, non-screen activities. Now that all said, I don't mean to kind of undercut all that I've sort of pointed out here, but the truth of the matter is that people don't really stick to their routine, right? Even that student who I showed you is very, very, I think, impressive timetable, he struggles to keep up with it. Right. So what I say to people is that at the very, very least, you want to try and get the most important buckets in there, academic time, meals, right? Family time, downtime. Okay. Try to organize them in 1 to 3 hour intervals and just do the best that you can. Right. And if you're able to, kind of get those general blocks together and coordinate it with the other people in the house, you'll be in good shape. So now we'll talk about this idea of space. So this topic obviously varies by household. Some live in a standalone house, some may live in an apartment. And of course, these spaces come in all shapes and sizes. Ultimately, space comes down to a simple question, right? How can we all give the learners in the space, the space and the time so they can focus on their work, okay? So for some families, if they have the space, this is less of an issue, but no matter the size of your home, at the end of the day, even in large homes, the most successful learning and production occurs with the elimination of distraction, okay? So I would say people designate or pick a space, that has limited or no distractions and make that your workspace, right? What do you need? You need a chair, a desktop, it's gotta be near Wi-Fi, it's gotta be near power, right? These are things that we need. Pick a spot to keep your work or for your work materials to reside. We don't want papers all over the bathroom floor, okay? Or like our, iPad in the hallway, right? Where do these things live? Give it, a home and, let it live there. And also one more thing too about, picking spaces. Like I always say, it's always probably best to put it more, especially for younger kids, in a more like kind of like public space or public room, like the dining room, rather than their bedroom, just so you can kind of stay on it as necessary. Also, we want the bedroom to stay as a place of rest and refuge and not necessarily like tech center. Again, that's really probably for younger kids. As for the kitchen, it's usually the best place in the house, no matter the time of day. And so despite the title of this talk, turning your kitchen into a classroom, I usually advise against working in the kitchen. Plus, one of the biggest challenges from working from home, and I learned this back when I started working, freelance remotely in 2002, is food. Serious, right? It can be an irresistible distraction, whether you're hungry or not, right? Your body is aware of the location it's in, and it knows, what it's used to doing in that context, right? So usually staying away from the kitchen is a smart move. However, if the kitchen's a must, I suggest that you eat before you start your academic work. Clean up and put the food away so you can't see it. If you really need to, maybe have a glass of water, right, nearby, not only just to hydrate, but also maybe to kind of satiate any cravings that you may have. Right. And also respect the space. Okay. Give the students space, be mindful and courteous of when you choose to enter it, and, avoid using that space for other, purposes other than what we need. Because again, we want to eliminate distraction. Now, as far as technology goes, just a few quick tips before we kind of move on. Before you start your work session, be sure to confirm that you have the following set up before you start, right? Your device, power cords, school materials, textbooks, worksheets. Make sure your device is turned on, right? Make sure that it's charged. Make sure that you open up all the necessary tabs, apps, or websites. Make sure you have connectivity, right? Make sure you can connect to the internet, right? You want to be ready to go. Right now, the trend seems to be asynchronous learning, which means, people are learning on their own time at their own pace. Teachers are sort of assigning assignments, pushing out materials, and students are figuring out when to do it on their own. That said, some students, some classes are still having synchronous instruction where everyone is coming together at the same time, and the teacher's leading them through, a common experience. We really want to be ready to go because, there's only so much time in the day. We want to make sure that the work is as productive as possible. And if I told you how much time, can be lost, by not having people ready to go at the start, you might be surprised. So, but again, finally, this idea of, turning off notifications, right? I think perhaps the most important thing, especially for people with devices, even like my phone right now, I have it turned off, is this idea of making sure that you're not getting notifications during the work, right? Again, we want to eliminate distractions. So, regardless of your student's age, there's a few things that you can really do to help them succeed, right? So like for one, here's what you can do. Get them started, right? Help them with any tech, any materials or setup that their class or learning module, make sure that their learning module is started smoothly and that they're paying attention and that they're engaged in the task, and, especially if they're younger, right? Also, troubleshoot, be their tech expert, be like the in-house geek squad. Help them solve any tech issues related to their device or camera or audio, file share, live chat, so they can really engage in the learning experience, right? And again, disable notifications, make sure that they're off. Also too, private chat is a thing that you want to be mindful of if they're, whether they're in a synchronous classroom experience that's being led by their teacher or they're doing a project with their friend. The private chat, that can also be a distraction, right? And then a few more things here, structure their time strategically after academic time, right? Play a board game, hold a music class, create a quiz, get kids outside. Students of all ages, they need fresh air. They have to run around, get them involved in the game of Foursquare, or sport in the backyard, if it's safe, of course, in your context. Not only is it good for the brain, it's good for the soul, right? The thing too that I always say to people is that even when you're kind of stuck in the house and we don't want to watch television, you can even look at television as a productive or constructive, exercise. So like, for example, I have a fifth grader who's 11, and I have a third grader and they're 8. And almost, each evening, from 7 to 8, we'll watch Wheel of Fortune at 7 o'clock and Jeopardy at 7:30. We're working at our verbal skills. We're working at our gaming skills. We're doing, we're adding up all the, the dollars that people are accruing. Those are actually very constructive and creative academic exercises. And if there's one thing to take away from this entire kind of like, tips and best practices, is this idea that they make sure that the students are getting quality work done. This is the absolute most important thing that you can do to make remote learning successful. As I said earlier, learning technologies are really best used as a bridge, right, between learner and teacher. If we're giving the teacher our absolute best, we should be able to receive their best back in return, which benefits the student because they're getting more accurate and personalized, guidance and information to help them learn and grow. So whatever you can do, right, to help them be, putting in the absolute best and giving, the right data, that's great. So how do you do this? Well, here's one example. Talk to your student after the lesson. Engage them in conversation, right? Not just in what the lesson was about, but how the teacher is maybe evaluating their progress and what deliverables and measures are in place to make sure the student is actually providing their best work, right? Ask to see it. Not because you're checking on them necessarily, but because you want to learn more about how the teacher is using technology to facilitate their learning, right? These are really great ways of making sure that the student is actually getting the right information and making sure that, they're bringing their best and that they are giving the teacher exactly what they need, right? And then, sort of finally, encourage them to no end, right? You want to praise your kids for a job well done and for an effort well made. It can make all the difference. I talk about this a lot in the standardized test preparation process, is that parents are the secret sauce. Why? You're there between the sessions, right? And that role has been now kind of exploded within the current context, right? So helping to make sure that your student is doing their absolute best, right? Putting that information through their teachers, receiving the best back and saying, amazing job, you're doing great. That's what sets them on the right track. Okay, so a few more things, then we'll get to the Q&A. So, extra time, we've all seen a variety of ways to use our time during the COVID-19 pandemic productively. And, I wanted to share some of my recommendations. So, a couple of things here, right? So number one, practice wellness, sleep, exercise, nutrition, read, non-screen time, right? These are all really, really important things. Avoid, reading the news. Also enrichment, learn a new subject, learn how to code, on one of the free coding websites. There's 1,000 of those now. Learning a new language through like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone, or a musical instrument like piano through, your tablet, GarageBand or YouTube. Travel to a new country. Do you know that you can actually go to the top of Mount Everest on Google Images? I've done it. It's awesome. Okay. And if possible, we're lucky here because we have a trail system behind our house. We're able to go outside and go on the trails where there's nobody, right? Get some fresh air, right? That's enriching for the soul. Also upskill. There's a few different what's called online micromasters programs through edX, like at MIT and Columbia, where you can learn, you can do, whether it's data analytics or even like an AI micromasters. These are completely online courses. And, they're all part of like the upskilling sort of trend, not trend, but movement now. You can get certifications through places like Coursera. I did my certification or specialization in entrepreneurship through the Wharton School of Business on Coursera. It's quite good. LinkedIn Learning has, as well as, even Salesforce has, they have something called, I think it's called like Trailways or Pathfinder. I forget what it's called. But they have ways for you to actually develop in-demand skills that employers are looking for, okay? And that they're evaluating graduates and that graduates normally don't have. So that's good. Also, this idea, it's an idea of kind of getting creative, get back to drawing, painting, right? Write music, write the book that you've had outlined in your head for the last 15, 20 years, right? Also, obviously getting personal, spending more time deepening your personal connection with your partner, your spouse, starting a new TV series with your spouse, or simply picking up the phone to catch up with family, friends, and other significant people in your life that, in modern times, we may not have the actual time to. So now, use your time constructively for specific groups. So for elementary students, I think this is a great time to help introduce executive functioning. Start working on time management, keeping a schedule, self-discipline, and other, traits like that. It also might be a way for you to introduce socialization through teleconferencing. Our daughters are having a 30-minute phone call with a friend, a few days a week. These are ways of getting them, acclimated to some of the other, things about life, or we may not ever want to expose them to until they're older, but we can do it now in a way that we can manage. And that's also, in some ways responsible and also constructive. Middle schoolers, avoiding the summer melt is always talked about, where summer melt is when you go into the summer and forget everything you learned. That's actually, we're vulnerable right now for that, right? How can we help middle schoolers understand how to stay on top of their academic skills, especially ones who are in 8th grade and going into high school next year, right? Also for middle schoolers to, start thinking about who you want to be. We have a session that we do called Envision Your Future, and I'm now starting to do it with more and more middle schoolers. Where do you want to be in 5, 10, 20 years? Who can you, what can you do today to work towards those goals? Those are healthy conversations to have even with middle schoolers at this point. Then for high school underclassmen, begin researching colleges online. There's a lot going on right now with a push towards virtual visits to universities. I certainly support that, but to be quite honest, I think a better, well, not better, but a unique opportunity that we all have right now, if we're an underclassman in high school, is reaching out and connecting with professors who really interest you at universities. That's especially important for juniors, who can't do school visits, right, until the summer or fall. And, we all know that university's character or college's character, it's about buildings and resources. It's about the people, right? So this is a really great way, authentic way to connect with these schools and learn more about them through the people who are there making it happen, right? Also, begin a passion project. We do a lot of passion project development with our students. And this is a time to either start one or transition one to online delivery through an LMS like a LearnDash, right? Which is an LMS platform that's very, very easy to use. If you've been doing like community service work, how do you take that work and now deliver it online to the communities who are in need and the communities that you support? For high schoolers, by this time next week, they should all know kind of where they stand on the university, notifications. Review those. Start making a plan to make those decisions, if there's decisions to be made. And then, once you kind of get past that, get ahead on freshman year, right? Reach out to students, professors, friends affiliated with the university to see, what you can do to get ahead on course selection, housing, and whatever else, you can to start yourself off on the right foot. And then just finally here, college students and parents, college students, you're probably thinking about your summer internship and job search, right? Research the place where you may want to work, who has the job that you may eventually want, what did they do to get there? Connect with that person if you can through LinkedIn. What skills is HR looking for? Ask these people. Maybe then go to some of these other online platforms and try to upskill or fill those gaps. If you're not sure of what the future may hold, there's a lot of universities that offer 5th-year master's programs. I have a student right now who is at Penn. She's a junior, and we're now talking about her submatriculating in the Graduate School of Education because she wants to do education work in developing nations. So we're working on that application, right? There's a way to use the time to get ahead, on some of these questions and some of these priorities. And then, with parents, this applies to you as well. I mean, reflect on your career, right? Consider boosting your skills, building your own success roadmap, because we don't know what the future is going to hold. And I think that in many ways, our greatest opportunity right now is reflection. You know, taking stock of what we've done up to this point, right? You know, what's working, what's not working, you know, what can we do to improve, right? And ask ourselves the questions that we ask our, you know, our students and our children to ask themselves at some point. You know, who do you want to be, right? What impact you want to have in your community and why? This is the time to really kind of connect with ourselves and tap into what really, really, you know, fuels us, and figure out ways of really harnessing that and embracing it and really kind of exploring it to its fullest power. So, and of course, supporting your kids. So Q&A time. You know, we have about, 10 minutes or so. I would love to just sort of take some questions in the chat thread. I'll take them in as they come up, if there are any. So yeah, you want to go to the Zoom chat. Let me take a look in here. If there's anything in here. Michelle, iPhone metacognition. I like that as a parent tool. Absolutely. Again, we talked about IXL and Minecraft. Are there any other questions? Okay, question coming in from Karen. Any tips for my high school freshman with ADHD? Sure, plenty. My first question though is, how is the ADHD sort of factoring into, what his or her needs may be? Is this a matter of how to focus during the day, structure their time, or in what respect? If you can be a bit more specific, I'm very happy to give some. Okay, he needs more structure. Right, so I would, again, talk about organizing our day. Okay, if you've already done that, please let me know. And if there's sort of issues in there, I'll tend to that. But more generally, saying to ourselves, look, we get up at like 7 o'clock, lights out at 11 o'clock, and here's the way that we structure our day. Okay, and maybe not necessarily making it down to the 15-minute interval, but really trying to like help them understand, here's what we're doing during this time, and here's what we're not doing during this time. Here's what we're doing during this time, and here's what we're not doing during this time. And I think one of the things too that helps to make that a bit more productive, like I was saying earlier, I kind of organize my day into core tasks, sort of FTA, feed the animal task, and then kind of all other. You can also do that within the time buckets. So if we're talking about, say, like academic work, and we have, say, like a 2-hour, block, well, maybe like the first, say, like 20 minutes or so, it's about reviewing all the notes, that are applicable to today's lesson or today's module. Okay. Then we're spending, the next, I don't know what, hour and a half or so, right? Doing the actual work. We're actually breaking it up into 2 45-minute sections, and maybe we're having like a 5-minute break in between. And then we're doing reflection work, right? So finding ways to kind of break up and give, a greater intent, focus, and purpose to like the subcomponents of each bucket, that could also work. Hopefully that's helpful to you, Karen. And if you have more specific questions within, structural needs, I'm happy to answer those as well. Other questions? Other questions? Okay, good. It seems like that was helpful to you, Karen. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, Karen or Corinne. Okay, so Adam is asking a question here, which is, what do you suggest for Adam's typing? Again, no question. I'm also happy to go back over any of the slides or any of the sort of topics that I talked about previously. Adam, parents, what do you suggest for parents when your student just refuses to listen to you and the schedules you've set for them? Basically, discipline. Sure. So Here's a story. Um, one of the one of the priorities in my house is trying to keep the bench, next to the garage door, an actual bench, and not a place to put boots, and not a place to put book bags. And so one of the things that I've done uh, to facilitate that is to basically give sort of rewards and benefits. I know that's not always the smartest strategy, but I'm finding that it's useful. So when all of our shoes are put away and our bags are in the right place, well, then we can actually watch Wheel of Fortune tonight, right? And if we do both of those things, as well as, put out all of our, clothes the next day, or, make sure that all of our books and our materials are in the right place or the proper place, then we can actually watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. So, Adam, I think it's a matter of, identifying what are things that that the student cares about, or wants to be able to do, and then finding a way to contextualize what you want to have done within that particular desire, and that's a way to start. So, as far as discipline goes, I always think that providing people with rewards and thumbs up and, hey, you're doing this really well, right? Focusing on what's actually working, that works. Another thing too, I'll say, Adam, is that there's a book called A Peaceful Parent. And the entire book could be boiled down into 3 bullet points. Number 1, self-regulation. Number 2, number 1 is self-regulation. Number 2, foster connection. And then number 3 is, what is it? Self-regulation, self-regulation, foster connection, and then coach rather than control. So making sure, number 1, that you're keeping yourself kind of cool, calm, and collected, despite what might be, hysteria. Okay. Try to connect with that person individually. Hey, right? Instead of getting all kind of crazy and whatnot, really trying to connect with them, right? Fostering that relationship. Okay. Finding a way in to make that personal connection. And then instead of trying to control the student or the child, coach them. Hey, you know what? When one does this, here's what happens. One does that, here's what happens, right? And what happens is that in some ways you're kind of objectifying him. I use that in a variety of contexts, even with my own kids, and I feel like that's really quite helpful. And then, okay, so Adam, hopefully that's useful. And then we have Mac Mini 16 here. Why are school teachers not taking this job seriously? I find they're not really giving the kids much to do. So it's a really good question. Like in any other profession, there's varying levels of desire to excel. So I think that's kind of part of it. I think secondly, one of the things about learning technologies that's really sort of interesting is that most learning technologies, it's getting better, but most learning technologies are not developed with teachers. So teachers don't really know how to use them. So if they don't really know how to use them, then they really can't leverage, what they're, meant to do. And therefore there might be a sense of disengagement with the technology. And, Mac Mini 16, I kind of wonder if, that might be kind of a factor here, which is, we're not in school. I've sent the work, I'm getting it back. And so some of these teachers is kind of maybe sort of checking the box, right? And they're not really putting effort in because they may not feel inclined to, either because of a personal level or because they may be unfamiliar with the resources and the tools available to them. Now that said, if you do feel like they're not really giving kids much to do, 2 things: find something else for them to do, or secondly, reach out to administration. I mean, that's the other thing too, right? This is brand new for 99% of the people who are going through it. So I would say talk to your administrators, talk to the academic dean at your school, whatever school context your sons or daughters are in, and ask them, give them the feedback, right? You do have a voice in this, and so I'd say exercise it. Hopefully that's helpful to you. And then here we got, here we got Jason here. For ADHD students, have you found it helpful for students to write out step-by-steps for individual assignments? I have. There's a number of different sort of factors at play there. I have found that with students who are ADHD, in a nutshell, what you have to do is keep them physically involved. So for example, last year I had a student who was taking the ACT, and he was losing focus, which makes total sense. So I had him use his pencil kind of as a weapon, right? His pencil was his strategy for staying focused. So what did that mean? It meant putting all of his thinking on paper. So it means circling details and questions, breaking things down. And even with like devices, you can do that, because if you're working with a tablet and say you're working like say Microsoft OneNote, you can actually do that, right? And then of course, when they're actually going through problem solving, actually doing step by step, 1, 2, 3, right? And then not only does it keep them focused, but a second thing happens. One of the reasons why students make careless errors on, on their tests, whether it's school-based tests or standardized tests, is because their mind is constantly running predictions on what they think it's seeing. So if you're able to break it down step by step, then students are, especially ones with ADHD, they're in a position to more successfully, look at things more clearly for what they are, and then sort of prevent themselves from sort of filling in gaps and, misinforming themselves as you're, in their problem solving. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Another question here from Mac Mini. Right now the kids are in charge of the parents to some degree. What to do when one parent is mentally struggling with corona anxiety and the other parent is out of the house work? That's a really good question. In that respect, there are service providers out there who can actually act as what I call the super sibling, right? They can kind of, come in and kind of help bring some stability to the household if that's necessary. Another way to do it too is to maybe even use like a learning management system. But, in that particular context, oftentimes involving another person, whether it's an older sibling, a service provider, or maybe a tech tool, that's probably where I go with that. So I'll take one more question, if there is one more question. Give us a few moments to consider that. And then, well, that's nice. I got a message here from Hannah. Cool thing, Dad. I hope that's Hannah, my daughter. Very good. All right, well, look, we'll leave it there. We'll be sending out a link to this video. We're doing this talk again tonight at 7 p.m. for people who couldn't make it during this time. I hope you found it valuable. We'll be in touch with some follow-up steps. And again, this is a brand new landscape for all of us. And if there's anything specific within the context of the slides today that you want to learn more about, that we can go even more deeply into, please let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'll do whatever we can to try to, provide you with opportunities for more webinars or other tools, other resources. So thanks again, and have a great, rest of your day, and good luck to you, and let us know what we can do to help you out. See ya.